Great.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wesley Clem. I'm the president of the Central Florida Astronomical Society, and welcome to our November general meeting via Zoom. Tonight's agenda, let's see, we've got first, if you're joining us and you are not a member of CFAS, why not? You give us a shot. We have excellent private events. We have our dark sky viewing locations. You can join us out there if you are unsure of how to use your telescope or you just want to have a nice moment out at a dark sky. We have access to the darkest skies around here, at least within like an hour's drive of Orlando. We also have an excellent loaner telescope program and remote observing program. We have lots of telescopes that you can check out and use, try before you buy, sort of thing. It's a great program. We also have an excellent online community. You can join our groups.io where you can join, ask questions. If you have an interest in visual astronomy, imaging, sketching, whatever, there's lots of people in our club that you can get to know and ask questions and join those like-minded little groups and chat about even among the different avenues of astronomy, which ones you like. So we also have our quarterly meetings out at Seminole State's Planetarium, which is a fantastic place for an Astro Club to meet. So it doesn't really get much better than that. We have those quarterly meetings in January, June, September, and sometimes in December. So those are awesome. They're very fun, and the programs in the planetarium are really, really cool. You also get a membership to the Astronomical League, which gets you that reflector magazine and those little challenges you can do to image different things throughout the year, or the sketching. There's various different challenges the Astronomical League has, so those are often very fun for our members. And we are also a nonprofit, a 501(c)(3) organization. We are all volunteers here. Nobody gets paid. So we're all doing our part to further the love of astronomy among our members, ourselves, and our community. So we're doing everything we can to further the goal. You also get a discount on Astronomy Magazine and Sky and Telescope. So that's also a really good perk. Tonight's agenda, we have Dr. Anika Mehlis, and we're going to have a little chat and Q&A moderated by Sharifa Gassel. They're going to have a little chat about the stuff that they've been working on in the past year or so. Then we're going to have club news, upcoming events, both club and astronomical. And then finally, we'll wrap it up with our astrophotography showcase. We've got some good images tonight to show you, so stick around if you have a chance. So, all right. So, Sharifa, if you want to get going with Dr. Melis, I'll do her introduction. Dr. Anika Melis is a microbiologist, environmental engineer, PhD in public health, analog astronaut, systemic counselor therapist, author, and speaker. Dr. Anika Melis combines science, psychology, and exploration in a way that few people do. Trained as a biologist and environmental engineer, she earned her PhD in public health at Bielefeld University in Germany and currently works as a systemic counselor therapist in private practice, public health lecturer at a local university, and an author. After leading the Department of Hygiene and Environmental Medicine in the German Public Health Authority, she turned towards the question that now drives her work. How can humans remain healthy and connected in complex environments on Earth and beyond? Her psychotherapy concentrates on non-monogamous as well as neurodiverse clients. Since 2018, Dr. Mehlis has served as an analog astronaut with the Austrian Space Forum, participating in Mars simulation missions in the Negev Desert and Armenia, where human performance, resilience, and environmental interfaces are tested for future planetary exploration. She was the commander of the crew in Armenia in 2024 and led the Mission Coordination Center as the director of operations in Vienna, Austria for the world's biggest analog in October of 25. As a scientist, author, Kniesbeck Verlag, wo die Zufung der Raumfahrt beginnt. I hope I didn't butcher that too badly. Speaker and counselor therapist, she bridges fields from microbiology and systems thinking to trauma-sensitive leadership and psychological health. So, okay. I'll stop sharing here, and then you guys can take over.
Awesome, awesome, Monica. If you want to go ahead and start sharing and get going, and once we reach the WBA stuff, we can have a chat. Does that work?
So
Perfect.
thanks for the kind introduction and also the invitation. And the way that Sharif and I thought about how we would do this is that I will give you I try to keep it short introduction to what simulated Mars missions are about and what we are doing. And then we get to the part where Sharif and I know each other from, the WBA that just finished and wrapped up in October. And then we can have a little Q&A and chat back and forth. And please raise your hand or write in the chat if I'm too quick or if you have any questions. And if it takes too long, then Sharif just stop me because I tend to get carried away a little bit as well. So I'm going to start sharing just a sec. Here we go. And I have to start my presentation. Almost there. Don't let me because I can't. This is strange. Just a second. Sorry. Now we go. Okay. Okay, can you see the presentation all right? Okay, perfect.
We're good.
So, for starters, you just heard that I am an analog astronaut with the Austrian Space Forum, and I wanted to quickly introduce the forum. The Austrian Space Forum is called Austrian because that's where it was founded more than 20 years ago, but by now it has become a European organization. A lot of volunteers, also our organization is volunteer driven from countries all over Europe. And analog astronauts and analog missions, for the ones of you that have not heard about those, are missions that simulate conditions, not all of them at once, but the ones that are interesting and that we want to explore, of future missions to Moon or, in our case, Mars. And all of you might know that ESA and NASA have formulated the wish or the plan to go back to the Moon in the next few years. And the next step from there will be Mars, for example, to look for traces of life, to understand better how our solar system formed, how planets evolve, and to answer some of the big questions that will then, of course, as science tends to go, give us new questions. But to go to Mars, first we have to figure out how to do so. Who of you knows which expedition is in this picture? If you do know, then you just unmute yourself and throw it in or write it in the chat. Anyone? Okay, I don't see anything. So this, yeah, sorry.
Someone saying Amundsen.
Yeah, perfect. So this is
good job, Luke.
The Fram mission. That is Amundsen, who reached the South Pole as the first human in history. And only a little bit more than 50 years later, the first man stepped on the moon, which is quite amazing. And of course, and that's why I'm showing this picture. So for one, the first female German astronaut reached space this year, Rabea Rogge, and the mission that she was on was called Fram 2, named after this first mission of Amundsen, but also because those people did not just go up and went to the South Pole. Before they started their exploration, they had smaller missions for training and for testing out their equipment, for figuring out who to take, how much food to take, what equipment, which navigational instruments, and so on they needed. And that's exactly what we are doing just for missions to space. And this picture here is, again, something for you to take part in. So who of you can guess which one is on Mars and which one is on Earth? And maybe everyone who thinks that the uppermost picture is Earth and the lower picture is Mars can raise their hand now or like show their thumbs up. Okay, there's one or two raising their hands. Who thinks it's the other way around and Mars is on top and the Earth is the lower one? Okay, there's more hands now. If I would stop the presentation and change the picture and draw this lower picture a little bit further down, then you would see that the upper picture has several black spots because that's where the pictures that the rover took on Mars are sampled together. So the picture in the upper half, that's on Mars, and the lower half is in the Sahara on Germany, on Earth. So what you can see here is that both areas look eerily similar. So there is areas on Earth that from a geological point of view or from the remoteness point of view or other factors are quite similar to what you might expect on Mars. And of course, if you look at temperature or gravity or stuff like that, you can't really simulate it perfectly, but you can choose areas on Earth that, for example, from the geological point of view, how they were formed by maybe flowing water or also by wind and sand and so on, or impacts, where you could go on Earth to test out workflows that you would later also put into service on Mars, and that might be the ones to find traces of life on Mars. So to become an analog astronaut, there's a selection that you have to take part in. And there is an open call right now. Unfortunately, it's only for people from ESA member states in our case, but there's other groups in the world. And Sharifa, for example, can tell you that she has been an analog astronaut or is an analog astronaut as well on high seas, for example, on Hawaii. So yeah, once you are selected, there's a lot of training involved. And you might be happy to see that astronomy and planetology is high up on the list. So we did have training in night sky orientation, for example, and a lot of other things like geology. We have to learn how to work with the spacesuit simulators that we use, but also a lot of first aid and quad bike driving. And you might be able to tell from the pictures that it's quite fun, but also quite intense and exhausting. But yeah, that's what we did as our basic training. And then we do mission-specific training for the big analog missions that we do every few years. And the one thing that the Austrian Space Forum is quite, let's say, known for is that we always simulate the time delay that is due to the big distance between Mars and the Earth. So we simulate 10 minutes for one way, having a habitat in an area on Earth that simulates Mars and a mission support center. And it's on purpose, it's not the mission control center, because with this kind of time delay, it's really difficult to control anything. You can support the mission, but it takes a while to get your information across and so on. And that's a big difference to missions that are on the ISS or even the moon, because you have near instant communication then. So that's one of the things that we test and where we adjust workflows to this time difference. And this is what it looks like once we do those missions. So in 21, due to COVID, it was planned for 20, but then it went to 21. I was able to spend 4 weeks in the Negev desert in Israel, in the Ramon crater. We were there for 4 weeks, and then 6 analog astronauts were isolated in a habitat, conducting a lot of scientific experiments, and only going outside into spacesuit simulators that weigh about 50 kilos, and that we use to simulate how spacesuits will work on Mars. And then taking geological samples, flying drones, but also doing a lot of microbiology, medicine, psychology, robotics, and so on inside of the habitat. And all the data that we collect is later published and given to the scientists that brought in the experiments. And also there's always cooperations with ESA for the development of materials or 3D printing and a lot of other things. And the Mission Support Center on Earth is also something that Sharif and I know now very well, because for the last few weeks for the world's biggest analog, that's where we spend our time, but that's where we are going to get to later. And on Earth, a lot of IT people, scientists, remote science support, but also flight planning, medical doctors, and so on. Media teams stay and support the whole mission. And on Mars, this is what our habitat looked like in the Negev desert. You can see two modules. One was for living quarters and one was for science. Also the containers that we used to transport everything there, solar panels, satellite dish. So yeah, that's what it looked like out from the air. And what we do then is that we simulate that we landed on Mars, spending those 4 weeks trying to look for traces of life, testing out all the workflows, communication, data flow pathways, and then going back. And these are some more impressions from what it looked like in Israel, on the inside. And that's my colleague, Carmen Köhler, also from Germany, and myself on one of our EVAs, extravehicular activities, as we also call the spacewalks we do on the planet's surface. And those are the suits that we use. I think this is also a video. Let's see if this works. So there's also a lot of media activities involved because, of course, speaking about what we do and informing people and motivating young people to join STEM subjects and getting active in the fields is also very important. But we also have a lot of rovers in this case. And drones that several universities bring to the missions to test out all those things. Exactly. And this one was designed before Ingenuity, the drone that flew already on Mars, was designed. So this is like a precursor model to the actual Ingenuity that later landed and flew on Mars. And getting to the end of my part, this is from last year in Armenia, where I was commander of a 4-week mission. And you can tell that the habitat looks totally different. So this one was simulating a habitat that is 3D printed on site out of regolith or material that you can find in the area, and also submerged or built inside of the hillside a little bit for radiation protection. Because on Mars, you might think about going underground to have better protection. And we were there in the high mountains with a very nice view of the Ararat, the mountain where in the Bible Noah's Ark stranded. So we had a view of the Ararat, of the big volcano, out of our window. And stepping out there in the suit, looking at this volcano and thinking about how it would be to be on Mars and to see the volcanoes there, that was quite a nice feeling. Yeah, and this are some impressions of the experiments we did. So we have botany, we have a lot of, this one was from the University of Bremen in Germany, where we looked for how AI can support analog astronauts or astronauts with their work. Yeah, and that concludes like my past experiences. And this year in October, for 2 weeks, the world's biggest analog took part, which had the idea that not only one group would land on Mars, but simultaneously there's going to be 1 or 2 or more groups on the moon, maybe some in spaceships in transit or on space stations, and several teams on Mars. And you can imagine that if it's already a big thing to have one group and to have all the logistics and the communication, then imagine 16 habitats all over the planet having to be coordinated and led. And that's what Sharif and I did. We were in Vienna, where the Mission Support Center was located. And with that, I would say I'm giving over to you.
Awesome. I love it. So if anyone has any questions or thoughts or feedback or anything, feel free to put them in the chat and I'll keep an eye on that. And, if you want to raise your hand, we can make this conversation or something. But I am curious. So having been, with your background, Anika, with everything you've done in public health and microbiology and, and everything. How has your background prepared you for any of your analog missions? How would you say?
Um, I think it did not prepare me so much directly. I mean, of course, once I did my first microbiology experiment, and I was quite a lot faster than my colleagues who did not have this background. I was like, yay, my studies finally paid off.
Mm.
But I think what I mostly used is my ability to, have new fields of study and quickly get used to new environments or to study many things in a short amount of time. And also, I think being a mom and being a lot of, being used to juggling several things at once,
Mhm.
that also helped a lot, I guess.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think that being very curious about everything and loving to get to know new people and new things helped me most. Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's more of the person, the characteristics that you bring more than the skills that you could potentially,
Yeah.
learn and on the spot and stuff. And so Barack is asking, are all of these locations coordinated together under one command, or are they run by various countries? And so that's kind of a great question to segue into how the WBA, the world's biggest analog, was structured. And, like you mentioned, Anika, the 16 different habitats on 5 different continents with one mission. And so the mission was to do the mission, which was about 2 weeks, depending, give or take, depending on the habitat. And they were all kind of starting at the same time and ending at the same time. Each one of the habitats, if you look at the different dots on the map, had their own mission control, which was localized. And then those localized mission controls would coordinate with the main mission control in Vienna. And so we would have different positions that were in the operations room in Vienna that were, and you can see that picture there. Yeah. And so the first, by the EU flag, by the Austrian flag, you have from like top and going counterclockwise, you have EarthCom 1, which they would coordinate with a certain group of habitats. And so any communication that could be done with the habitats themselves would be done through the different EarthComs and Earth communication. There would be 3 of them. So EarthCom 1 was assigned about 5, give or take. Is that like more or less habitats? And then they would communicate with the different mission controls in, the various regions. EarthCom 2 would be the same kind of thing for a different set of habitats. And it was split up between the 16 different habitats. So there wasn't kind of a mudding of communication, and it could be kind of one point of contact. And so then the way that it was distributed, like from, kind of roles and whatnot, Anika was the director of operations. And so you're kind of the final say in what was going on and, coordinating everything and making sure everything did happened and went well and smoothly. And it was a pleasure to work with you in that. And then I was there, kind of making sure that the different groups could be doing their jobs and so on and so forth. We also had a remote science team, which helped each of the habitats checking in with their research. And yeah, this is one of the pictures. There were different shift changes throughout the mission, and so this is about halfway, a little bit past halfway, with a group of everybody. And so we have people from the operations room to the remote science team room and meteorology. We have the media team and the Earth comms, and we had different like human factors, and there was future fiction, which they were having like a writing project. And so they were, how many people would you say were involved kind of collectively, not only in MicoV, but in the WBA, like more or less how many?
I want to say in VB or in Mico Vienna, with all the shift change and so on, maybe 40 people. But if you take in the crews in the habitat plus their MST and then all the scientists, I'm quite sure close to maybe 200
Yeah,
people, if
yeah,
not
yeah,
more. Yeah.
yeah. So coordinating about 200 some, give or take, people globally all at one time, and you can see how big this project really was with everything. So I have a question from Luke. Let's see. How do the volunteers get enough time off to work to participate in these simulations? I'll go ahead and let you.
Yeah, so in the case of the Austrian Space Forum, since again everyone is voluntarily there, in my case, I had to take my whole year's vacation. In Germany, you have more than in the US, but still it's not 4 weeks. So I had to take also over like the hours I worked more before to then be able to take off 4 weeks of work. But some of my colleagues are working for ESA in their normal day life. So the ESA representatives got like paid leave from ESA to do the missions. But yeah, mostly you have to be able to take off that time from your work and family and so on. And also, since it's not paid, you have also to be able to afford staying away for 4 weeks. We do get paid for the flights and accommodation and so on. And of course, if later you do any talks or stuff where you get money for, then that's a nice benefit. But you're not in it for the money at all, I would say. Otherwise, you wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I could agree with that. And there's also a second part to his question, which how did you go from working in microbiology to psychotherapy? And that's a question that I can answer as well.
Yeah, go ahead. You go
So,
first.
so those that I'm not sure who of CFAS knows, like my background academically, my first degree is in molecular biology and microbiology, and so that's my background as well. Changed to psychology, got a second degree, and then also veterinary medicine, and then back to clinical mental health counseling. And so I've kind of done a similar path, which is bizarre that like we ended up working together here. And it was just kind of one for mine. It was just life and kind of growing on the profession. It wasn't anything. I didn't pursue microbiology to a doctorate level or or anything. So it just kind of changed in career, and absolutely loved what I can do with human behavior and explored that. And here I am. And so bringing a lot of the human behavior component to human spaceflight. And then you have the analog world, which introduces that. And there's always bits of it when you're on a mission that, at least for me, I found with the microbiology background, we were able to jump in and help with cultures and with, different agar plates and whatever. That was something that came up, and, also kind of a way of thinking. But, yeah. How about you?
Yeah, quite the same, I would say, that I started microbiology after school because I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grow up, and it was just fun at school, so I decided to pursue it. And then life happened, and I was working at a lab that had a different, didn't focus on microbiology, but more like chemistry. So I decided to, again, I wanted to learn more, so I did my second degree in environmental engineering. And then I changed jobs again, and working for a public health department, it kind of made sense to pursue that. And since I did not want to do another master's, I decided to do my PhD in that area. And then when I started doing analogs, also from my personal life changed. And so I kind of had the feeling that everything went back to the human factor and the human behavior and psychology. And no matter where I looked, I saw that common denominator. And that's how I ended up in that area. And I don't know if I'm going to be there still in 10 years from now, but I like to keep that open and to stay curious. And having done so many different jobs already, or pursued so many different areas of science as well, I get the feeling that a lot of similarities open up if you do enough. And then you can combine and mix, and it's quite fun to stay on the intersections and to transfer knowledge and methods and so on from one area to the other. So I like doing that now. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah, 100%. I love making the connections between the different fields that seem like they're completely independent, and then finding that common thread. It's something that it's fun to be able to do that. And I just realized that I skipped over Jeff's question, which I will come back to right after this other one. So how did your role as director of operations evolve? Get a very big question, kind of from the beginning when you first started to kind of what you walked out with. Like, how did the process go for you?
So I came on board quite late, very shortly before the mission, only maybe 6 months or so, that I knew that I would have that role. And I have to say that in the beginning, I was asked if I would like to take part and to have some role at Miko Vienna by the Austrian Space Forum. And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? It's going to be fun to have the perspective to stay on the Earth side for a change. And please don't make me lead anything. I just want to be EarthCom or something small where I can gain experience. And then, how it works if there's a line of volunteers and you're asked to take a step forward, you're standing there and everyone else is taking a step backwards. So that's I was kind of the last one standing, and that's how I got that role. And I came there, yeah, feeling slightly prepared. I did not really know what to expect because I did not have any prior experience. I had great support from the whole team and my colleagues that have been flight directors for our missions. So yeah, I just winged it and learned as I was going along. And yeah, it was a steep learning curve. I had a lot of fun. It was also quite exhausting, I have to be honest, because you had to concentrate so hard the whole time. But yeah, I think you can also see from the pictures, and they are not like staged, at least not very much, that we really had a great time. And again, as for all the missions, I love it so much to meet so many different people from all over the world, working together, so many different backgrounds, so many, and then also meeting people that are eerily like have similar life paths or something or topics. So that's really amazing. And it always gives me a lot of hope no matter what goes on in the world and politics-wise, whatever, to see that it's possible, that people can work together and that they can reach great things if they throw everything together and pool resources. So yeah, that's actually why I keep doing this mostly.
I mean, that's quite a journey from, I have no idea how I ended up here to here is this transformative thing of we put our minds together, the difference and coming together and, you can accomplish incredible things. And so you can see that, like mentioned in the pictures, in the ops room alone, top right picture, we have, I don't even know how many nationalities. We had like a group that were from Israel, a group that were from
Italy,
Italy. Yeah, a couple from Italy,
Austria,
Austria,
US,
right? Right.
Israel, Germany, US,
Yeah, US.
Hungary.
Okay. Yeah. And so they just all these different countries coming together for this one mission and communicating, in my opinion, very, very effectively and very well. And a testament to the leadership and just everybody and the team. When you're looking at the pictures up here, if you notice the four screens that are in the middle. So we had up there we had the RSS, so the remote science team, and just an outline of the different experiments that were going on in the different habitats, and updates on what was happening with them. And the left screen, we had kind of a live feed with one of the habitats in Portugal, and they were a blast. And every day they would send us like little printed love notes that they would put up on their camera, and just like really inspirational, kind of go get them, we were another soul together. And just it was neat to connect with the actual habitat, so you're not just in your MecoV bubble. All right, and then on the left, the six screens that are on the left hand wall, we had different sensors, so CMOC sensors that were developed by the Habitat SAM in Utah, and they were recording, registering different levels of like CO2 and different temperature, humidity, and different measurements that we were keeping an eye on, and just another experiment. So everything had kind of a purpose with it on there. So the bottom picture in the middle is what we would do twice a day. More or less, we do in the morning a morning meeting, and all the different teams, everybody would come together from MECO Vienna and kind of prep for the day, get a meeting, just a morning meeting of what to expect in the day, any planned events, and then we do the same thing at the end of the shifts. And the shifts were about like from 8:45 or so to about 5, give or take. And then we would have we called a pool party. And at the end of the shift, we would come and just basically debrief what happened throughout the day, and then what would be expected the next day. So that leads me to Jeff's question. So how do you protect astronauts from high energy radiation over long time periods in space and on Mars? And that might be an interesting segue into the second code orange, which we had, which was a CME, which might be relevant to what's going on right now with the CME and that we're having the Aurora show up. So how do you think? How do you think protect astronauts from high energy radiation over long time periods in space and on Mars? Thoughts?
Yeah, so for one, we don't know yet, and like we don't have the technology yet to really do it, but we are testing. So in Israel for the last mission, we had a radiation protection vest from Lockheed Martin, that we tested as a control group. We had to wear them several days and to fill out all the NASA standard questionnaires regarding movement and variability and so on. And the same vessel later flew with the Orion capsule to space for further testing. And they're supposed to protect the marrow of the bones, the big bones, the hips, and so on that have bone marrow that has stem cells. So even if you have radiation damages, then as long as those areas of your body are protected, they can later regenerate. So that is one thing, that by wearing several protection items, you can protect astronauts a little bit. And the second part is that you need shielding. So one thought is to have the spaceship and also later the habitat that you use shielded by, for example, water tanks on the outside of the ship, or at least for certain areas of the ship. And that's what Sharifa just said, that for the simulation that we did and the emergency with the solar flare, we had the crews shield in their habitat in protected areas, or simulate to do so. And also what I said before about the habitat being built half or the whole habitat underground would also help with radiation protection. But again, up until now, we do not have all the technology we need to really make sure that people are protected for the long flight, for the stay, and the long flight back. So yeah, still a lot of science to be done to make sure that people not only get there, but also get back safely and sound.
Yeah, so that was one of the things that when I say code orange, we had a couple different codes that were code for something. So code red was actual real emergency. Like, you don't want that to happen for real, and that was a real emergency. Fortunately, that didn't happen. And then code orange was a simulation of an emergency. And so we had, at least in my time there were two of them. And one of them was on my first day, like 2 hours into the shift. And then, and then the second one was, I think like second or third to last day, something like that. And then we had another code orange that was simulating a CME, blasting on the lunar habitats. And so the way that the codes would, with the code orange was work, it's kind of testing to see what would happen. And so it's a simulation for mission control. What happens if you're given kind of a curveball simulation? The habitats are in on it, and you can see some of the inside of the habitats. The leadership, so the director of the Austrian Space Forum, Gurno, he would contact kind of side behind the scenes, would contact the habitats that would be in on it and kind of set them up with, or whatever other teams would be in on it, and kind of set the stage and give them information on kind of what to play along and what roles to have. And so for the CME simulation, the code orange, with that one, there were big CMEs that were hitting the lunar habitats. And so the meteorology department in our morning meeting came and said, okay, well, there's a lot of solar activity that's going to be hitting the moon today. And obviously this is all simulated, but they would pretend, and then, we would have to kind of play it by ear and see what would happen. And so if there's solar activity hitting the moon, what happens? And so then throughout the day, we would get messages at mission control saying, from the lunar habitat, saying, this is what's going on, right? And so then it was a test to how do they handle it, navigate the code, and how do we navigate the code from the mission side and mission control side, and then kind of working through strategizing, problem solving, etc. So that was the second one. Anika, you mind sharing a little bit about the first one with the water filter and the water pump, rather? Yeah, water filter.
Yeah, the water filter. So again, we knew it was a code orange, but we didn't know what to expect. So we got a first message through one of the Earth comms that one of the Mars habitats had some difficulties with crew members feeling sick, having a headache, fever, and not feeling well. And at the beginning, we did not think too much of it, but then a second habitat reported the same symptoms for several of their crew members. And once the third habitat reported the same ones, we knew something was really wrong. And then it was like an escape game. Like, looking back, it was quite fun, but inside of it was quite high intensity. So yeah, we tried to figure out what was wrong. Did they eat something? Did they all share the same water source? What was the problem? And yeah, in the end, we figured out that a certain charge of water filters, like only for 3 of the habitats out of 10, were built in a way that made them, susceptible for damage during the landing of the module. So several of them were, damaged, and the others were not. So we knew then to tell the habitats to change that filter and how to treat their crew members, and then everything was resolved. And the whole thing took about 3 hours, maybe 3 to 4 hours. So our time was measured. When did we get which information, via which pathways, what did we think of, which questions did we ask, how well the teams work together, did we make use of all the resources that we had at our hands, and so on, to really see how a real emergency would have played out. So yeah, that was quite interesting, I have to say.
Yeah, yeah, and I think they after the fact, they kind of did a timing on it, so it was like 2 hours from the hypothesis to, or from the beginning, from the first message to getting a hypothesis, and then again an hour or so after that till we kind of came to a solution. And so it was about a few hours to play through the whole simulation. And when you think about doing that, you can like, so to make it different, then we're not playing space, right? We're not just kind of pretending and acting out these roles and everything, but there is actual reason why we do this, right? Either for Earth or for then what do you do with this research? All right, and so that might be questions of why do we do analog missions? Anybody? And so, any of the analog missions, why do we do them? So, kind of, what are some of the thoughts? What are some of the reasons that you've come across of why analog? Why do we do this?
So for one, it's cheaper than actually doing all of that in space. It's more like it's way safer if you have an emergency on Earth because a technology or a workflow didn't work, then the next hospital is a few minutes by helicopter away. And also, if you go to space, you always have a lot of, let's say it's very expensive to send up materials, and then you have only a very limited number of people doing the experiments. For example, you have six astronauts on the ISS at any given time. And if you then have people on Earth that have a similar training, maybe a similar background, and that can simulate a lot of the conditions. I mean, you cannot simulate 0G as well, but other than that, you can simulate the isolation, you can simulate the time delay, you can simulate the confined quarters, you can simulate the workload, and so on and so on. And then you have way bigger numbers. You can, for the world's biggest analog, 16 habitats with 2 to 6 analog astronauts. So the number N in your experiments is way higher than just having 3 or 6 people on the ISS. So you can then use those as control groups and compare the data. And you can make mistakes very fast and quite cheap compared to doing them for real. And you have a steep learning curve. And also all the big agencies actually use analog research for preparation. So already the Apollo time astronauts, they trained in deserts. They did all the geology training before. They did like also going on a centrifuge. It's an analog to flying on a rocket. Also diving in the pools for training for EVAs is an analogy to going for spacewalk. So all the analogies that you can use on Earth are there for training and preparation.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. Yeah, so a reminder, if anyone has any questions, excuse me, feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand or whatever, and we'll go through them. Actually, do you mind going back to the previous slide? I just want to go through these real quick and mention some. Thank you. So these are 3 of the 16 habitats that were part of the mission. So Sam was top left on the left-hand side. And so that was Matthias who was in there. And so I think he was by himself. I could be wrong. I think he was in there by himself. And so Sam is in Utah, and that was one of the habitats. And so then obviously in the US, and then you have Habitat Marte on the right, and they were in Brazil. And then ASP, which was Monsaraz, which was in Portugal. And so, again, many other habitats, which I couldn't include all 16 in one slide, or for the sake of time, all of them. But the idea is that you have all of these people from all different countries kind of coming together. And so it brings up one of the things that I took from it was the diversity piece in communicating, where there are different time zones. Right, we all kind of operated off of UTC, but where the habitat in Australia was like a day ahead of time, and then you would have the habitats out in Utah, Sam, that was a day about 6 hours behind us, and so coordinating that, on top of coordinating if there was any kind of difference in language barrier with anything either in MecoV or in the different habitats. You have kind of different just cultural norms, just differences that would come in from that. So with that, what do you think were some of the aspects that made it work, and maybe some of the challenges with that?
Mm-hmm. So I switched back to this picture to show this clock on the wall quickly, because there's 5 time zones here. And then, of course, we did have the summer-winter time change during this time to make it all more complicated, just to stress what you just said. Yeah, I would say what makes it work is people wanting to make it work and talking to each other, and putting aside differences and finding similarities, and pulling through, even if it's difficult, because you have a common aim or goal. And difficulties, you just mentioned cultural differences. So that was quite interesting to me. For example, if you have psychological questionnaires, asking people for how they feel or how they experience things, I did not really think about how different the answers would be depending on culture. So some of the people were really not used to speaking about their feelings at all, or even having the vocabulary for it. And they were more pointing out like physical things like tummy ache or headache or whatever, even though they mean that they are feeling sad or off or something. Mm. And others might be very like expressive and vocal about all their feelings, and maybe like it might, to somebody who's quite clinical or maybe very like neutral, it might even sound a lot of like dramatic or overdoing it, but it's their normal cultural way of communicating. So those are things that you have to be aware of and take into account and accommodate if you then go through your data and compare it. So that's one of the things that stood out to me. Again, psychology, which like points out what I said
We're
before,
biased.
that I think it's all, yeah, maybe.
It's okay. It's good. It worked. Right? Yeah. Awesome. And here we have a couple more also, and I mentioned the one in Australia, which is the right, and they were in, if I understood it correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, they were kind of in a building, and so they were kind of in the inflatable habitat that was inside kind of a warehouse type structure. And so if I remember correctly, they were doing a lunar simulation, and they had the regolith, and they had their area separate, and that was Australia. And the commander for this was for that mission in Australia was actually the commander for my mission, which was funny to kind of be on the other side of it. So it was neat to be able to feel connected with the crews that were actually doing the missions and some of the habitats. It's like, oh, I know them, and like you're invested in that because they're real people to you. And so, Anika, for you, what was it like kind of being on the other side? Right, you've done analog missions as an analog astronaut, and so being in the mission control side, what was that like for you?
It was very interesting to have this different perspective. So compared to being on Mars in one of the missions, it felt very far away, like very much outside of things, in a sense that I did not have a lot of situational awareness or knowledge about what they were doing, like their day-to-day stuff, what their like minor problems from our point of view would be, and so on. But on the other hand, I felt like I had the bigger picture. I knew more about how the others were doing, how the experiments were supposed to work, stuff like that. So yeah, it's different, not better or worse, it's just different. And I really like that I now know what it feels like, how desperate you sometimes are for information coming from the habitats, that they're like waiting for the data that they are supposed to be sending,
Mhm.
and how like dependent you are on them. Because if you're on the other side, on Mars, you feel that you're very dependent on Earth as well. So it's good to remind yourself that it goes both ways. And that communication and going the extra mile, sending something, even though you might not have to, just to show that you are aware that they are waiting for stuff and that they are also interested and invested and spending their time and energy, goes a long way. Yeah, and the whole stuff of us versus them happening, for example, or we talked about the 3/4 phenomenon, that if you have a certain amount of time during one of those missions, that around 3/4 through the whole thing, you might feel a little bit down or like a dip in energy and in concentration and so on. And I think we also experienced that. And that was interesting that it also happened on the Earth side, not only on the Mars side. So yeah, many things that I think were or are very good to know, that for future missions, no matter which side I will be on, I will understand how the other side feels and thinks and acts and spends their days. And I think that's very valuable having both.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. And it's funny you mentioned the 3/4 phenomenon because I'm literally mentioning that in a session last week with someone and kind of like that concept. And so it applies in so many different areas. With that, you mentioned the bigger picture. Luke has a question also about the night sky, which is like the biggest picture. For the night sky orientation part of the training, do they account for the differences between skies? So different moons on Mars or et cetera, which is a fantastic question. So, night sky training, it would probably depend on that, but also, maybe the weather and kind of what meteorology team was reporting. And what are your thoughts?
So actually our night sky orientation was for Earth, on Earth, because it's supposed to be helping you if you are, like, for example, if you land on Earth after a mission and you do not land on the supposed spot, but somewhere in the desert or wherever, that you survive for 2 to 3 days. And also NASA and ESA astronauts train for that, and go to distant areas of the Earth, and have to sustain themselves for 2 to 3 days. So that's what we did also. And then we implemented the night sky orientation for orienting ourselves without a compass or without any more instruments. But of course, we did also learn about planetology and Mars, and also the moons and of Mars and so on. And one fun fact maybe that's also interesting or might be interesting, in Israel, in the Negev desert, in the Ramon crater, that's actually a night sky or a light pollution-free area. That's a protected area, where there are strict regulations about human habitation and about lights. And when you spend time there, and we were able to stay inside of the area overnight if we adhered to the regulation. And we could sit outside before the isolation phase started. And we sat there for hours on end, just looking at the sky, because it was so beautiful. I've never before in my life seen the night sky that way. The one time that came closest was when I was in Nevada in the desert. But yeah, that was amazing, because for normal people like me living in the city, not doing a lot of astronomy, that was one of the most amazing parts of being able to stay there in the desert. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you mentioned earlier about stepping out and looking at the mountain and feeling like you were on another planet, essentially paraphrasing, and what that was like, kind of stepping outside and what do you think were some of the maybe the overview effects type? So kind of the shifting your perspective, things that maybe kind of might, shifting your perspective to something greater than you or something, different, that maybe the night sky contributed to that. Something that was like awe-inspiring, something that was wow as a result of, your own missions and being in a habitat.
Mm-hmm. So definitely in the night sky, and also the view of the Ararat, or just being in the desert where nobody else is allowed to stay overnight, for example. I would say, except that, or besides that, it's more the contrast. So spending 4 weeks with a group of people doing a lot of science, and then going back to your normal life. So when I stepped foot in the airport in Yerevan in Armenia, that was the first time I used money after almost 5 weeks. And that felt so strange. And only then did I realize that I did not use money for this amount of time. I didn't think about it during the time, but just at the switch back to the normal life. And those were moments, and that's several topics that felt the same, where the difference between those worlds made me aware how different life could be. And as for the overview effect, I think that then maybe flying back, I mean, it's also if you go on vacation, right? I mean, at least for me, it's like that. If you go on vacation or business trip, whatever, and you fly somewhere and you leave your normal life and you remove yourself by plane mostly, and then the world gets smaller, and then you land somewhere else and dive into the other life there. This whole change of perspective already is enough for me to make me aware of and thankful for stuff that I might take for granted in my normal day life. And this part of being in awe or being aware and being thankful, that like the mind shift or the perspective change that I always take away from those missions. And even though they are not on another planet, it makes me aware that so many people live on this planet, and all those borders are just on maps and people made them up. And yeah, that's enough overview for me, I would say.
That's, and any more, your head would explode. So it's interesting, with a group of astronomers or amateur astronomers, and it's like looking through a telescope. And obviously, everybody has their different reasons and why we look up, but that can be a common thing, and why we do that, and kind of it can be a a way to get perspective on the universe and our place in it. So, Peter Lefebvre has a question. Have any analog missions had to be canceled or altered due to illness or accidents? And that's a great question. If so, it's a very realistic thing, right? So if so, how does this provide input into future mission planning?
So I'm not aware for the WBA that anything like that was the case. And for our missions, we always train more people than actually go to the mission, which is also what the big agencies do. So if there's 6 analog astronauts planned for a mission, then you have 3 backups that train everything with them for the whole year coming up or leading up to the mission. And then they literally stand in front of the starting ramp, and then only then it's decided who goes in and who will do the mission. And they would be able to swap places if somebody gets injured. But you're also, let's say, encouraged not to engage in any risk sports or high risk activities. So a lot of us are like divers, skydivers, whatever. And for the last 6 months before mission, we are asked to refrain from those activities. Yeah. And I think for future mission planning, that's already a given that you would also factor that in and do that this way. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can just the last couple of minutes. Anyone has any final thoughts or questions? We'll wrap it up in a couple of minutes. But I can speak that for NASA missions, for their and NASA analogs, they have a backup crew that, in a similar way, that they'll choose a backup crew just in case anything happens, and they kind of train along the way, and then they're kind of in communication with the crews that are selected with that. So yeah, so if people want to become analog astronauts, that is something, or join the analog community. It's something, a question that I get with any of the talks that I give or anything about the analog world. People want to know how to get involved, right? And how to become, is this for them? Is this something that they could do? Maybe they're not in STEM fields, or maybe they are, or whatever, given the during the backgrounds, whatever. So what would you suggest? People are interested in becoming an analog astronaut. What do you think?
Yeah. I would say that the nice thing about space is that it needs everyone. We need people that know about food. We know people that know about sports. We need people that know about jurisdiction. We need people that know IT, and so on and so on. So whoever is interested, and whatever your background is, there's for sure a way to get involved. So there's several bigger groups that do analog research in the world, the Austrian Space Forum just being one of them. For the Austrian Space Forum, as I said before, to become an analog astronaut, you have to be from a ESA member state, but there's nothing banning you from being part of, for example, missions at the Mission Support Center. And there's actually a training program. It's called Analog Mission Basic Training and Advanced Training. That's done every few months, 1 or 2 times a year, that everyone can apply for. And then once you've done those, then you are eligible for being at Mission Support Center for future missions. And then there's other groups where you can apply. They have calls every now and then. Most of them are lower threshold, I would say. There's not such a big selection process behind it. Some of them you pay to go to. Others are led by universities. And if you have a study program or if you have an experiment that you want to run, then you can just approach them and either be part of a mission or have your experiment been run there and get the data back. So yeah, there's so many ways of involving yourself and programs that I would suggest to start somewhere and research a little bit. Go to Arizona for the Analog Astronaut Conference, for example. Look up people on LinkedIn. Just start somewhere, talk to people, and then get pointers from them. That would be my idea. And before I was thinking that I wanted to tell you that this is Jordan. That was also one of the sites of the world's biggest analog. And then the last slide, so I can stop sharing and then we can see each other a little bit better. So that I wanted to throw in here. So, okay.
Awesome. And what is the best way if anybody has any follow-up questions or anything, obviously with CFAS, you're welcome to send me an email and I'll put my contact information in the chat. Or if you see me in Geneva or in a meeting or whatever, you just ask me. If you have any questions for Anika, I can forward them or whatever. But if you have any questions, someone wants to, find out more about your work, what's the best way to find out more about your work?
I would also say you Google me and then you will find me, I'm afraid. But LinkedIn, Instagram, or my website are, I think, the best ways of reaching me if you have any questions.
Perfect.
And I just saw in the chat now that I stopped sharing that Peter asked if somebody was injured or if anything had to be
that was the question.
During a mission. During a mission.
Yeah.
And not as far as I know for our missions, but that's also a big concern, of course. So there's a lot of training going into first aid and medical assistance. And also we always have medical experiments where we train to draw blood or where we have ultrasound and the pictures are then sent to Earth for doctors to evaluate, for example, and many more. To train and to optimize workflows for medical treatment once you are on Mars.
Yeah, and if there's anything that actually happens on site or during the mission, that we have also a medical team on call and support staff, whatever. But awesome, cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was
You're
great.
Very welcome. That was
obviously
fun.
see you
Thanks
again.
For
it's
all
been
the questions.
2 weeks since I saw you last, and so I will look forward to reading your book in German and doing my best to translate how best I can and then learn German in the process. So if anyone doesn't have any other questions, I will go ahead and hand it back over to Wes. And thank you again, Anika. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Mehlis, and thank you, Sharifa. That was really interesting. That's super cool what those missions accomplish. I can't wait to see what further missions produce and more questions that we can ask and what we can figure out from them. That's awesome. Okay, let's get on with club news. Let me share my screen over here. Right. All right, we have club news. November 14th to the 15th, we've got our Geneva Dark Sky Night. That's coming this coming weekend. I believe we still need to figure out which of or if both nights are going to be nights for us out there. But I think we're still checking the weather. But the last time I checked, it was still looking pretty good. So keep an eye out on groups.io to see if that announcement is made. It should be today or tomorrow, I would guess, to figure out which ones. So get your scopes ready. Let's see. What's happening here? Of course, of course. Hold on. There we go. All right. Our remote sea star out in Starfront is still going strong. We have several nights open this month. There are lots of free nights coming up, I'm pretty sure, last time I checked the schedule. So reach out to Pete Lefebvre, if you are interested in using that remote sea star out in a pristine dark sky. Like it's Bortle 1, it doesn't get really much better than that. So if you have an interest in a sea star, give it a shot. It's really, really cool. I've gotten a chance to use it a time or two, and it's really, really nice. That those dark skies are great. So give it a shot. And just so you know, the Sea Star archive, all of the data that we've been collecting from it is in our archive, and we're up to over 200 gigs of data. So if you are an aspiring imager or an experienced one and want to play with some CSAR data from a dark sky, go check out our archive. Download any one of those, process them. Feel free to submit them during one of our general meetings, and it's fun to play with. It gives you a chance to process some data, play with somebody else's data and not your own. You know, it's a good experience. So give it a shot. We have a bunch of upcoming outreach opportunities this week, this month. Tomorrow, November 13th, is the Cypress Ridge Elementary School. This weekend, November 15th and 16th, is Sci-Fi Weekend at the Orlando Science Center, and that's going to be a solar event. So if you have a solar filter for your scope, come join us out there. I'm hoping that I'll be out there Sunday of the 2 days. So come join us out there. That's a fun one. Got a lot of kids. It's really cool. November 18th, the Maitland Public Library is having a telescope viewing. November 19th, we've got the Esplanade Men's Club Astronomy Night. And then Derek just announced this one yesterday, I think. November 22nd, we have a Saturn Star Party out at the Seminole State College. We'll be setting up scopes across the parking lot there where if you're experienced with it, it's over by that lake, I believe, is where he said we'll be setting up. If you are at all interested in joining in on outreach events, go to the cfas.groups.io/g/outreach, mouthful. Join that group and give us a shot. Join in one of those groups. It's very, very rewarding. I really can't emphasize that enough. When you have a little child or middle-aged person or elderly walk up to an eyepiece for the first time and take a look at Saturn and be like, "Oh my God," or other choice words. It's very, very rewarding to get that reaction. It's what we're shooting for as a club, right? On December 4th, we've got another Astrophotography Basics Zoom session with John Sasson. He's going to be doing some of the basics like gear setup and other general knowledge things about astrophotography. So if you have an interest in astrophotography, be sure to join in on that and see what we can learn. December 13th, next month, we also have another Dark Sky Night out in Geneva, and that weekend it is just the one night, I believe. January 14th will be our next general meeting via Zoom, where we're going to have Melissa Kalin. She's an Aurora chaser and the founder of the Aurora Summit. So back in a couple months in January, be sure to join us for that one. And then more sooner than that, December 20th, the holiday party, that is coming up. So the holiday party, that's going to be a lunch on December 20th out at the Black Hammock out in the Oviedo area. So that holiday party is going to consist of club updates, a presentation by Jean Wright, who is a former NASA aerospace. She's a seamstress on the shuttle program, and then followed that by a buffet lunch and a raffle of some cool stuff. So be sure to join for that part if you can. Following that, we're making a whole day out of this from 4 p.m. until midnight after the lunch at the Black Hammock. We are going to be going out to our Geneva site for a dark sky night. So that's just going to be a big fun day of astronomy and fellowship. It's going to be great. We're going to have a great lunch and then go out and join together for what we all love anyway, is to look through telescopes, do photography, or just bring yourselves. It doesn't matter. Just it's to further get together on a nice, lovely, hopefully clear night. We did we did uh, have a ticket price for this one. The club is subsidizing a large portion of it, but we wanted to charge a small price just to make sure that we could make this party the best that we can and offer a really good meal and a really good experience for everyone. So if you haven't picked up your ticket, be sure to go onto groups.io. Isabel has posted the link there where you can click on and go buy your ticket and pick up the tickets for you, your spouse, your family, whatever you want, and hopefully we'll see you there. The deadline to buy those tickets is December 4th, so there is a deadline on that just so we can properly get the place catered by the Black Hammock. So be sure to get that in before December 4th, please. And a big thank you out to Isabelle Chafaton for putting this all together. It's been quite an endeavor, and she has done a wonderful job. So a big round of applause for Isabel. We really appreciate everything you've done for this one. All right. Welcome to our new members. If you are a new member, be sure to read your Welcome to the Central Florida Astronomical Society letter. It explains how to access the community on groups.io. It explains your member benefits. And if you have any further questions or concerns or whatever, just feel free to reach out to our board members at large, John Frank and Denise Woody at BML1 and BML2 at CFAS.org. Or you can reach out to me directly at president at CFAS.org, whichever you prefer. If you're in the club and you want to help out, we would really appreciate it. The board needs you. We are still looking for a loaner program chair. If you enjoy tinkering with telescopes, repairing them, messing around with mounts, and figuring out what is right or what is wrong, or looking at donations, this is the role for you. So if you have any interest at all, please reach out to us. If you have an interest in doing that, being a loaner program chair to handle that for us, that would be amazing. We are also looking for an assistant for Mr. Doug Woods. He's our outreach chair. He does a lot for a lot of different places. He goes out to places almost every week, it seems sometimes. So if he had a second in command, a lieutenant, whatever you want to call it, that would be really helpful to him. So if you have an interest in outreach, again, what I mentioned before, it's very rewarding. That would be a really big help to Doug and the rest of the board. So if you are interested, let us know. Or you can just serve on any committee. If you have any interest at all in any of the aspects of the club, you can serve on a committee or be just an extra hand helper to one of the existing committee chairs. We have events, programs, outreach, treasure, science, website, membership, observing, education, or if you have an idea of your own, let us know and maybe we can put something together. And also, John Sesson has been putting together the mentorship program. We have been working on that for a little bit, and we need more mentors. If you have a specialty, whether that's in visual or in astrophotography or anything else, sketching, let us know. Sign up to be a mentor. Any specialty is welcome. And also remember, as I mentioned before, CFAS is a 501c3 organization. We are a nonprofit, so any donations are tax deductible. So keep us in mind. We're always seeking sponsorships and corporate donations, and we are on cyber grants, which enables matching donations from Disney and other employers. So if you're thinking about that, just look into that. Let us know. Upcoming astronomical events. The daylight savings time is over and winter is here, which is sort of our bread and butter time of the year. The skies are getting cold, the skies are getting clear. Some really cool winter objects are coming up. We have the Pleiades and Orion and the Auriga area with like the flaming star, the tadpoles. We got a lot of fun stuff coming up in these nice cold dark clear skies. So we're always pretty excited about the winter after that cloudy summer we always end up here with in Florida. November 17th through the 18th, we have the Leonid meteor shower at its peak. A couple days ago, we saw a pretty nice fireball where we are, so we got some cool ones coming in this month, so keep an eye up. And also, I didn't know about this, as you probably saw on the news, we have the aurora going on. I hope some of you might have been able to see it last night. I saw some folks post pictures from here of it just, a pinkish red on the horizon, so that was pretty cool. So it might still be going on, so keep an eye out for that if it's still active. November 20th is the new moon, so if you're going to be doing any observing or imaging, that's around that, the week around that is the prime time to do that. So that we love the moon, we love that guy, but sometimes we don't want him up there so we can see stuff. November 21st, Uranus is at opposition, so if you're trying to see that or image that or doing whatever, that's the best time to see that because it's the biggest and brightest it's going to be. So check that out around that time. November 24th to 25th, I believe, are the dates for when Saturn's rings are as edge on as they're going to be. It sort of makes for a unique view of Saturn where the rings are barely there and you kind of just see the planet for what it is. So that's sort of an exciting thing to see it differently than you normally would. But this only happens every, I think, 12 to 15 years or so. So go check it out if you can. Now that brings us to our astrophotography showcase. If you submitted any images and you're here, feel free to unmute yourself, and I'll sort of pass the digital mic to you so you can describe your image and tell us about it. So first up, we have Jeffrey Merrick. I think I saw you here, so feel free
Yeah,
to.
I'm here.
Alrighty, Jeff, tell us about this one. I love these little
Oh,
galaxy clusters.
okay. Yeah, yeah, group of galaxies there. It's in the OP catalog, OP 113. I took this with the Magnu 190, and each image was 2 minute images, and I stacked 45 images together. Um, this is a group found in the constellation Andromeda. There's a total of about 40 galaxies in this group. And the brightest galaxy is 13 and a half in magnitude, and then it gets the magnitude goes up from there. Um, I can count about 30 galaxies in this one image. Um,
Wow,
it was
wow,
discovered in 1784, and it is at a distance of about 300 million light years.
very nice, very nice. 300 million. Wow. And what camera did you use to take this?
Orion G26.
Okay,
Yeah, that camera is pretty effective, and the telescope is pretty good at capturing a lot of these small and faint galaxies and galaxy clusters. Uh,
nice. I've heard really good things about that. That's a Mac Newt, right?
yeah, that's a Magnum 190.
Nice.
I mean, I love it for capturing these things.
That's
Uh,
super.
Large objects like the Andromeda Galaxy, you need the I don't know, the Raza 8 inch would do fine, I guess.
Very nice, very nice. And then you have another one for us here.
Yeah, there's been so many images of the comet Lemon, uh, but I kind of like this image because you can see some details in it. This was taken with my 200 millimeter zoom lens and camera um, at f3.0, 8 seconds, and I stacked 30 images in this shot. This was taken a couple of weeks ago. Um, the thing I gotta say about zoom lens and camera, 200 millimeter zoom lens and the camera lens is 82 millimeters. That's a small size telescope in itself.
Right.
And
Definitely.
um, when you attach a full frame camera to that, I mean, you really can get a lot of details on some of these. I have a 600 millimeter lens that I use sometimes to capture, um, you know, uh, nebula and large objects. But
Well,
anyways, this was taken right after sunset. Uh, the skies were all light polluted. I mean, I couldn't see the comet. I couldn't even see a star.
yeah, that's the thing about what we do sometimes is
That's the thing. Yeah, I didn't see one star in the sky. I didn't see the comet. I just pointed the camera west and hoped that I get something. So I tried 8 second exposures and then subtracted out the background and you see lots of stars, lots of the comet. And you see everything.
well,
So,
looks pretty good. You got a pretty good one there. So nicely
yeah.
done. Thank you. John Pinto, I didn't see him in the list, so John, if you're there, be sure to speak up. Yeah, I don't think he's here, so if you are, just let me know. But This is the Lobster Nebula with his C star S30. I would assume it was taken probably from his driveway or backyard or something like that. But this is a pretty dim one. So the fact that just with 97 minutes that the little sea star uh, could pick this up is pretty impressive. Like I've never hit this one myself because it's relatively dim and just haven't had the time to do it. So the little sea star that could, those things are just really cool at what they can pick up. So. And I do believe there's a protostar system in this somewhere that if you zoom in pretty good, you can see it. I don't know if the Sea Star picked it up, but somewhere there is a pretty cool thing. So pretty neat, John. Very nice. Next one, John Sasson. I saw you in the list, so I think you're there somewhere.
I'm here.
There you are. All right, here you go.
All right. So this is the Outer Limits Galaxy, or NGC 891. So I took this with my Celestron at 9 1/4 HD at its native focal length, which I believe is 22,350 millimeters. This is the first image I actually take with it. So first couple nights was just fighting a lot with getting the guiding set up and collimation and all that. So I ended up having to throw away a lot of data. So this ended up being about 10 hours or so total of LRGB. But, I'm still happy with the result.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got some pretty awesome detail there in the core and the dusty ring around that. That looks really good. Very very nice. Next up, Frank Kane, our now outgoing or previous president. He sent me one that he sent his scope. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but he sent, I think it's Scopy von Scopington or something like that. He had a new name for it. And he sent that out to Starfront. So it is in that Bortle 1 sky. So check this one out. This is M33, and I believe it is in HO LRGB. So it is broadband LRGB combined with some narrowband. There's some hydrogen and some oxygen thrown into this. So when you combine those filters, an excellent setup, and out in Bortle 1 dark skies, this is the kind of thing that you can get. And this is just a fantastic image of M33. It's one of our close celestial neighbors. I believe it's at about 3 million light years away. It's just like it's in our local group with us, Andromeda, and the Triangulum here, M33. So, man, Frank, nicely done. This is very cool. All those little nebulas just really pop out. There's just hundreds of them there, thousands probably. So very, very cool. And then finally, we got Pete Lefebvre, who was doing some playing with that data from our Sea Star art in Starfront. So here you go, Pete. I think you're here. I saw you somewhere.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, so every month for these meetings, I just take a look at what's in the archive and do a quick processing run on them just to give people a appreciation of what you can capture from Starfront. So the Rosette Nebula was 2.5 hours, and that was a particularly clear night, and I thought that came up pretty clear, especially given it was a mosaic. So you're
Oh,
not
really?
really getting
Okay.
that's 2.5 hours of the total time. So it's less actually because that was the mosaic mode.
Yeah, yeah. So like 1.25 maybe per frame, something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then the Helix Nebula, and that's a fairly long exposure for. I just look at how much data has accumulated on various nights, and a lot of people that use the scope tend to do some of the same objects based on what's prominent, and and that again that you get a really good. But this one, I mean, you see even after 3 or 4 10-second frames, it just pops up,
Yeah, the Helix is
directly
a
on the
pretty bright
screen.
one. That outer
Yeah,
ring is pretty bright when you do it with a filter, a narrowband of some sort.
yeah. And then the last one, that was noteworthy just because it had so many nights of viewing on it. So I was just curious to see how something with 7 hours of integration time of 10-second exposures would come out. And so that was you know, quite a nice view of the Iris Nebula. And thanks to all of the various users of the telescope that imaged that, I mean, you come out with a pretty good image.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
the processing is just except for the mosaic, the helix and Iris Nebula is just following that workflow that Frank had told us about for PixInsight. The fast batch pre-processing and just very simple uh, steps. So it just shows the impact of those dark skies on how an image can come out.
That's awesome. Super impressive. That iris looks really good. From any scope, that would be a pretty good iris. So
Yeah,
well done. I mean, this is what I was looking forward to see when we first put that out there. I was really excited to see, like, once we get, like, 4, 5, 7, 10 hours on a single object, like, what can that little thing do? And this is a
yeah,
great example of that. So if you're watching this and you haven't had a chance to get on the Sea Star out there in Starfront, contact Pete and he'll get you set up. He'll get you the onboarding process and get you some time on it so you can play with this and start contributing and get your own image. It's just super cool. I highly recommend it.
yeah. We've had people that go in that just had never used a sea star before, and I mean they've gotten some really good images even the first night. So a lot of
Absolutely.
fun.
Super. Thank you, Pete. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Appreciate that. All right. I think that pretty much brings it to an end here for our November meeting. Thank you so much for everybody for joining us at this funny time. The recording of it will be put up on YouTube, and I'll post it on groups.io. And again, special thanks to Dr. Mehlis and Sharifa for telling us all about their experiences over there with that world biggest analog. That was super cool. So thank you, everyone, and stay tuned. And hopefully, I'll see a bunch of you at our holiday party in December. So thank you so much, and clear skies. Bye bye.